I hope you guys are ready because this is what you all requested. While I'm thinking about it, do y'all like my glasses? I know y'all saw my other pair. Those were new, but these are also a new pair that I just got from Zulu. You know, I definitely would like a sponsorship if that's something y'all want to do, but I love them. These are going to be my new everyday glasses. I think they're so freaking cute with a little green on it. Green is my favorite color. I love them. What's good in the YouTube hood? It's your girl Luna Nova, and I am back with another video for you guys today. We were enjoying the spooky haunted people, places, and things of the US of A, and so we are going to take a trip down to my ancestral resting grounds of New Orleans, Louisiana. It is irrefutable that New Orleans is home to such rich history and culture, be it good or bad. Now, as I stated in many of my previous videos, this channel is all about, again, haunted people, places, and things, spooky phenomenons, and the paranormal, and everything that consists of the spiritual rabbit hole. And that is precisely what we are going to go over today in this video about New Orleans, Louisiana. The first place that we are going to explore is going to be the St. Louis Cemetery, number 1. Yes, number 1, because there are 3 of them apparently. But number 1 is the most popular because of the lovely voodoo queen, Maria Laveau. Now again, cemetery number 1 is the resting place of Maria Laveau, but there are other pretty interesting people that are buried there as well. And apparently the actor Nicolas Cage has a pre-planned burial spot that is in the shape of this interesting little white pyramid for himself when it is his time to go. I don't know why he would decide to bury himself there. I'm not sure if he's from there, but hey, to each his own. If you got the money, hey, do what you do. Because I definitely would love to be in the same resting grounds as the voodoo priestess herself. And again, my family is buried here in New Orleans on my father's side. 4 generations of my family are here, and I would love to be resting with them. Now again, the St. Louis Cemetery is extremely popular, extremely well known for several reasons, but one of the main reasons outside of Maria Laveau is the fact that very, very vivid ghosts have been seen there. Apparitions and paranormal activity runs rampant in cemetery number 1.
If you're in New Orleans, cemeteries are a must. St. Louis Cemetery number 1 is probably the best one to come to, and the only way to walk through the cemeteries is with a tour group. Maria Laveau, New Orleans Voodoo Queen, is here. The future tomb of actor Nicolas Cage is here. You'll notice the big pyramid. So come check it out, St. Louis Cemetery number 1.
Now we're gonna head over to St. Francisville, Louisiana, where apparently one of the most haunted, and of course there's gonna be that throughout this video because every place is the most haunted in New Orleans. But again, if you ask me, the whole city is just one of the most haunted places in the US of A. This former plantation was built in the 1700s. This plantation was home to over 30 different slaves at the time of it being a plantation. And of course, during the time of slavery, there were a lot of horrible and painful things that happened to the people that were living there. Now, the most well-known ghost that haunts this plantation to this day is going to be Chloe. And Chloe is known as, allegedly, the mistress of the manor. There are a couple different stories surrounding Chloe, but nonetheless, Chloe was unfortunately unalived by the other slaves on the plantation due to fear of retaliation from the Mr. and Mrs. of the plantation. If you are a bad enough haunted hottie, you can definitely still visit this plantation and spend the night, apparently. Now, me personally, I think I would want to do it just so I can get a feel for the energy myself. Because again, I'm with the shits. I'm definitely all about the paranormal and spooky activity. But what would you do? Would you spend the night or would you chicken out?
You can spend the night in America's most haunted house, the Myrtles Plantation. The Myrtles are a historic home here in St. Francisville, Louisiana, and a former antebellum plantation. This home is beautiful. It was built in the 1700s, and it's reported that over 10 murders have occurred here. Unsolved mysteries, ghost hunters, and multiple other people have come here trying to catch a glimpse of Chloe, who is said to be the most active ghost on the plantation. So Chloe was a slave to Clark and Sarah Woodruff. One of Chloe's stories is that he forced her into being his mistress. Another version is that they caught Chloe listening in at the keyholes to his business dealings, so they cut off her ears. So after that, she wore this green turban to hide that. Chloe bakes the cake for the family, and it has extract and boiled down oleander, which is extremely poisonous. Unfortunately for her, the whole family did not end up eating the cake. It was just the 2 daughters and the wife, and they did pass away. Fortunately, Chloe was hanged by the other slaves and thrown into the Mississippi River. Till this day, people are constantly seeing Chloe, whether it's in photos or face to face. I'm just gonna throw myself into this selfie here. Apparently Chloe's in the window, and this is posted by the Myrtles themselves. I feel like if you just go to the Myrtles, you're gonna see a ghost. The Woodruffs did own over 30 slaves, so there are plenty of apparitions to be seen. It's said that if you take a selfie in this mirror, that you will capture a ghost. And for under 150 bucks, you can spend the night here. You can grab lunch at restaurant 1796. The food is fantastic. They host a lot of events. You can grab a drink at the bar. The rooms are described as antique-filled, cottage vibe. It's said that Chloe likes to come at night while the women are sleeping and steal their earrings because her ears were stolen from her. So what you think? Are you staying there?
For this one, we're going to talk about the Myrtles Plantation of St. Francis, Louisiana. As legend has it, the Myrtles Plantation is home of multiple murders and other tales of great suffering that inspire ghost stories and ghost sightings that still continue to this day. Plantations in general, they're eerie reminders of the suffering of the past, so it's of no surprise to anybody when we hear places like this are haunted. The Myrtles Plantation, it was built by a man named David Bradford, a general in the American Revolutionary War in 1796, and at that time it was called Laurel Grove. Now, he was on the run from the Whiskey Rebellion that went on from 1791 to 1794, and so he was staying at that plantation by himself until he got pardoned, and after he was pardoned, he brought his family over. After Bradford's death, the plantation was passed down to his daughter and her husband, Clark Woodruff. Now, it was during the Woodruff's residency at the plantation that we got our first glimpse of the alleged paranormal activity. Now, the tale I'm going to tell you is of a ghost named Chloe. Now, it's believed that Clark had an insatiable appetite for, you know what, and he set his sights on the enslaved girl named Chloe, and she didn't want this, but she agonizingly relented and they began having a sexual relationship. Now, one day he believed that she was eavesdropping on one of his conversations, and as a punishment, he cut off her ear. Wanting a revenge, Chloe poisoned the family's food, and it ended up killing his wife and his 2 children. Now, fearing retribution, the other enslaved on the plantation ended up grabbing Chloe and hanging her from a tree. Even in death, Chloe never escaped, as she's still seen on the plantation. Now, historical records actually state that Sarah, the wife, and the daughters died of yellow fever. But is that the truth, as we're still seeing their ghosts today? Guests of the plantation have often heard scary noises and banging, seen apparitions, have had the sensation of their beds being lifted, and even being chased by a broom. Now tell me, who's ready for a vacation? Now, the next 2 videos that we are going to go over as far as reference clips are very well known if you have seen American Horror Story. And that is because American Horror Story filmed in these 2 mansions. That would be the LaLaurie Mansion as well as the Buckner Mansion. Madame LaLaurie was a wicked witch, if I do say so myself. The things that she has been accused of, and I'm going to say allegedly because I'm not trying to have any historians come at me for this, okay? This is for educational purposes. Take it with a grain of salt. Again, this is a community, so if I am wrong, I am not above criticism. Y'all can definitely leave it down in the comments, but I digress. Madame LaLaurie was known for torturing her slaves in her attic, so much to the point where they literally repoed her slaves because she was so horrendous to them. Yes, literally repoed them. Took them back. What bust this whole operation wide open was the fact that one of the slaves that was forced to be a cook was so fed up with the torture and the horrible atrocities that LaLaurie was doing that she decided to commit arson, literal arson, to set herself free of the bondage that she was in. There are several accounts of people reporting different paranormal activity taking place here, such as being scratched, pushed, cold chills and phenomenons happening, as well as apparently being attacked by a ghost. I don't know about you guys, but y'all know me. I like to square up with ghosts. You ain't finna touch me and get away with it, honey. If I don't do anything else, I'm gonna keep the protection on lock over here. I'm doing it all. Be gone, demon.
This is the most haunted house in New Orleans and possibly in all of America, the LaLaurie Mansion. This story is disturbing, so buckle up. This is Madame LaLaurie. She lived in the house with her family. 2 of her husbands died in the past, and people think she murdered them. She was played once by Kathy Bates on American Horror Story if you've seen Coven. But that's not the only dark thing that surrounds this house. Apparently, Madame LaLaurie had a torture chamber for her slaves upstairs, and the things that happened in that room I can't describe on this TikTok. You can look them up yourselves. No one in New Orleans understood what was happening inside of the house, but they eventually found out when one of the slaves set a fire in the kitchen in an attempt to take their own life. Also, a girl jumped from one of these windows to her death to escape Madame LaLaurie and was supposedly buried on the grounds. Paranormal events reported here include being attacked, pushed, shoved, hearing voices, and someone was even murdered by a ghost.
Now again, we are also going to talk about the Buckner Mansion. Now the Buckner Mansion is very popular. Buckner Mansion is where American Horror Story season for Coven was filmed at, where the Witches Academy was. The original owner of the mansion was Henry Buckner, and the reason why the house was so lavish is because apparently he was trying to keep up with the Joneses with his other buddy in Mississippi, so he had to outdo him with a bigger, more lavish home. Now, the Buckner Mansion is definitely one of the many places that I would love to go back and visit in New Orleans because I didn't get a chance to visit the first time. But I don't know about you guys. I don't have $20K laying around to go visit this place, and even if I did, I'm not paying that kind of money just because Hollywood decided to hype it up. Hollywood tends to get in the way of a lot of common folk being able to go and visit a lot of these historical places, and I refuse to feed into the propaganda. But what do y'all think?
History books. Come here, let me stretch y'all out right fast, because this New Orleans hood history on one of the most popular haunted houses in New Orleans, the Buckner Mansion. Now, the Buckner Mansion was built by Henry S. Buckner. They call him a cotton kingpin. You know what that means. And still to this day, it's said to be haunted by his housekeeper, Josephine, who died in the house. The Buckner Mansion is over 20,000 square feet, and it's only that big because Henry Buckner wanted to compete with his homeboy who had built a house in Natchez, Mississippi. In 1923, a dude named George Soleil moved his business school into the Buckner Mansion, and it stayed there until 1983. The Buckner Mansion probably always been haunted, but it didn't get popular until after American Horror Story started filming their show in there. The Buckner Mansion is located in the Garden District, so tourists is always there. Plus, you can rent it out for $20,000, and even if I had it, come on.
Now, the next few videos that we are going to go over are going to be about the French Quarter, the most famous part of New Orleans for its paranormal activity. Different houses, mansions, restaurants, different places, even on the streets of the French Quarter. You are definitely going to see some things. But the first thing that we're going to get into is something that I definitely was not aware of when it came to New Orleans, at least not the term anyway, because I've been there a few times, like I've said. And if I can, I'm gonna insert a little picture right here with me and my big sis, because that's who I went with when I went to New Orleans a few times. And I absolutely enjoyed it so much, but there was a freaky thing that happened with us. We were walking the streets of New Orleans, just partying, having fun with her boyfriend at the time, because he was from New Orleans. So he was our tour guide, you know, like that was our first time going there. So of course we wanted to have someone who was a native that knew where to take us and where not to take us. And while we are walking the streets of New Orleans, we got lost. I don't know how we got lost because it is nothing but a bunch of squares. It is nothing but a bunch of blocks. I'm from New York, so I definitely understand how to travel throughout cities. But something about New Orleans, baby, it is so easy to get lost. I feel like those spirits like to play tricks on people for the fuck of it. But the phenomenon that I am referring to is apparently called card shuffling.
Okay, the original post is gone, but I'm going to explain what they called card shuffling. This is a freaky phenomenon that happens in New Orleans, and I read in my comments somebody said that they experienced it also in Savannah, Georgia, where you're almost damn sure that you were just in a business or a bar or a shop, and later you find out that it never existed or it completely disappears. And a lot of people say that they've experienced this. New Orleans already has a rich history, culture, tradition, some of which is deeply rooted in the paranormal. So that tends to make New Orleans, and one of the most famous places in New Orleans, the French Quarter, a hot spot for paranormal activity. with people who are drawn to either experience their own paranormal activity or debunk it. So whether you're a believer or a skeptic, I think it's something that you have to experience yourself when you travel to New Orleans.
If you've ever traveled to New Orleans or done your history on New Orleans, then you have heard of the famous restaurant called Antoine's that was built back in the 1840s. This restaurant is apparently known for its exquisite cuisines as well as its extensive wine cellar. Now, the next video we are going to get into is about the wine cellar at Antoine's and what was captured on film there that is, in my opinion, irrefutable.
I need to tell you guys about the most insane evidence that I have ever seen of a ghost existing. Photos will be included. Backstory: I was at a company get-together with my CEOs, my coworkers, and one of the owners of the company. They've all looked at us and was like, hey, do you guys want to see a ghost picture? Immediately, yes. He begins to tell us that he was in New Orleans at a restaurant called Antoine's. New Orleans, first of all, super haunted city. If you know, you know. And Antoine's is one of the oldest restaurants in the city, one of the oldest restaurants, I believe, in America. It has a lot of history. It used to be a jail. It is a really well-established place, has been around forever. So he's dining at this restaurant and he is offered a tour of the wine cellar. The wine cellar is huge, has thousands of bottles of wine, probably worth millions of dollars. So he's taking a tour of the wine cellar, he's taking pictures. There's this guy in the wine cellar on a laptop who is apparently at auction buying more rare wine for the collection. My CEO takes pictures of this guy on his laptop, doesn't think anything of it, he doesn't see anything, leaves the restaurant, calls it a day. The next morning, he's looking through the photos and notices something in one of the pictures that he took in the wine cellar. I'm going to upload the first picture that he took. There's nothing that immediately jumped out in this picture, but I want to give a baseline. So this is the first picture that he showed me from the wine cellar. You can see this guy who is on his laptop at auction doing whatever. And here is the next picture that he took. So we all see that. That is a full body apparition. It looks like a woman in this like black Victorian dress. And when I was showed this, I genuinely had full body chills. That is insane. So he showed that to me. And keep in mind, he is showing me pictures from his camera roll. Like in sequence, time stamped. Those two pictures were like a minute apart. If that, like probably seconds apart. I see all the other pictures from his trip. This is not edited. He's also not the kind of person who would do anything like that. Like he hasn't posted this anywhere. It's just a story that he was telling us. I've never seen anything like this, and I need to not be alone in seeing this because holy shit.
I feel like Hollywood has some type of obsession about New Orleans and filming there, because another very popular show that was filmed there was The Originals. Now, I definitely enjoyed that show, but again, The Originals as well as American Horror Story definitely made these places pretty fucking popular. And since we're talking about Hollywood, it seems like Hollywood has an obsession with mythological creatures and folklore. And one of those things would be vampires. Where does the folklore of vampires in New Orleans originate? There once was a time in the French Quarter where a lot of the men that lived there complained about not being able to find any suitable wives to marry. And France declared that they had a solution for this problem, but it seemed like it sparked a bigger problem. In this next reference clip, we are going to get back into the lovely Marco J. Hey, Marco! I love you so much. And Marco is going to get into the origin story of where vampires come from in New Orleans.
Have you ever heard of the Casket Girls? This is kind of where the legend of vampires originated in New Orleans. There was a time when the men of New Orleans were complaining that they didn't have any desirable women to marry. The governor of French Louisiana, Jean Baptiste, sent a letter to King Louis requesting that he sends women that they can marry. King Louis does just that. However, during the transatlantic journey, the women had to stay below deck because of sailor superstition. It was bad luck to have a woman on deck. These women were becoming pale and brittle, their fingernails grew extremely long, and they were starting to contract diseases such as scurvy. Now, one of the main symptoms of scurvy is bleeding gums. These women were starting to look like death, so when they finally arrived in New Orleans, the men didn't desire them. They thought France was sending over monsters. Not to mention they were carrying wooden suitcases called casquettes, which contained everything they could bring to their new home. You can kind of see why one would think that they were smuggling vampires. Now, the Ursuline nuns who established an orphanage at the convent took them in. The casket girls found a home in the 3rd floor of the attic. Their coffin-like wooden boxes, which contained everything that they owned, were stashed at the foot of their bed. The nuns believed that the education of a woman was essential to a civilized, just, and spiritual society. In fact, one of the first pharmacists in the United States was an Ursuline woman. Diseases such as yellow fever swept the city. Men, women, and children were dying in the masses. Crops were also starting to fail. Whispers began that these pale vampire casket girls brought an evil with them from the old country. Eventually, the nuns threw the casket girls out and sealed off the 3rd floor to the attic. The shutters were sealed with screws that were blessed by the Pope himself, but people claim to see the shutters fly open late at night. Many believe that this is a result of the flying vampires returning to their caskets. But the legend of the vampire kicks up in the 1970s when 2 paranormal investigators snuck into the Ursuline convent. Their corpses were found the following morning extinguished of blood.
And last but definitely not least, we are going to get into the very well-known haunted Sultan's Palace. Now, the Sultan's Palace was originally built in the 1860s. The original owner was worried that he was not going to be able to keep his mansion and decided to lease it out. And in leasing out his property, there were some atrocities that took place that wound up creating this rumor of the place being haunted. The actual historical records on the Sultan's Palace are a little bit hit or miss, but nonetheless, the locals definitely have kept up the folklore that this place is definitely haunted.
Let's talk folklore. Have you ever heard of a building known as the Sultan's Palace in the French Quarter of New Orleans? Well, this building has some interesting history and is said to be pretty haunted. So let's dig into the backstory behind this haunted place. In the 1860s, the owner of this building was starting not to be able to afford his lavish life and was desperate to find somebody to lease it. That's when a man came to him claiming to be the brother of a sultan and was interested in leasing out the building. The man eagerly accepted and soon the sultan moved in. When the sultan moved in, people claimed that he was partying all night long but never with the locals. They never were able to see inside the house. Then one day, a big storm happened, and a day after, a man taking a walk started to see blood pooling from outside of the house. When police arrived at the house, there were bodies everywhere, and most of them weren't in one piece. And the Sultan himself was buried in the courtyard. Stay tuned for part 2 to hear about the hauntings of the Sultan's Palace. Back to New Orleans' haunted Sultan's Palace. So in the last video, we talked about all the things that happened in this building, but people aren't actually sure if it's true or not. Since it happened in the 1860s, the historical records on this are a little iffy, but almost everyone agrees something dark did happen here. People believe that these murders did in fact happen, and that's because they think they see the Sultan himself walk among the halls. For over 50 years, people have been describing the same man walking among the halls, when they know no residents with the description even lives there. He's said to peer out windows and stand on the balcony, but worse, he also disturbs some people while they sleep. On more than one occasion, people said this man has approached their bedside while they're trying to rest. But when they get up, he immediately disappears. People have also said they hear screams of pain in the middle of the night, and people have been chased out of the building by shadowy figures. So could this mass murder be true, or is there something else dark haunting this palace?
Regardless of what you think about the city of New Orleans, you cannot deny the rich history and culture from the food, from the clothes, from the fashion, from Hollywood, and just the spiritual atmosphere that is there, whether you want to acknowledge it or not. It's there, honey, and it's not going anywhere. Now, I am personally taking a trip back to New Orleans to visit a lot of these places. And one of those places I'm definitely going to be visiting is the St. Louis Cemetery because I want to go pay homage to the voodoo priestess, okay? I definitely adore Maria Laveau. I don't care what anybody says. And side note, I don't like the fact that American Horror Story tried to make it seem like not only was voodoo a bad thing, but Maria Laveau was an evil person, which could not be further from the truth. The amount of people that went to visit her to help with fertility, to help with going bankrupt, to help with just everyday things, to bring about happiness, to bring about beauty. Marie did it. Marie was that girl, okay? Irrefutable that she was that bitch, okay? She definitely was moving and shaking in these streets. But again, I definitely will be visiting New Orleans very soon, and I cannot wait to give you guys a scoop on what I find. But with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this video because I do want to do a little more personal research. I might not post it until I go to New Orleans, but I definitely will let y'all know what I find, as I always do. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this video. Make sure if you are looking to find me for readings or any of my products that you do not get scammed out of your money. Make sure that you are going to my Etsy. That is the only place that you can contact me, and that is the only place that you can book me for readings or any of my products. So with that being said, make sure you drink your water, mind your business, and stay prayed up and protected. And as always, Luna loves you.
Demander la charité, pas même si c'est pas ta